Previously on Lake of Voices, we made our perilous journey into the Lake of Voices with 3. Along the way, Margaret died a sad death. The guide continues to be uncaring of our welfare. We left a man alone to die. But we made it to the halfway point island. Now, we will make our way out. Through a thinner stand of trees, we briefly catch sight of the guide standing on one of the beaches. He seems fine, but even though I'm sure he turned his head toward me, he makes no show of acknowledging us. It takes less time than I would have hoped for us to see all there is on this isolated place. Now we will have to spend time simply waiting, a far more unpleasant task. We seat ourselves underneath a large tree at the meeting point. There's no sign of the sun setting, and I find myself becoming increasingly restless. I release a breath. I have yet to shake the dark and troubling thoughts coursing through my mind. A pat on my back grants me a moment's reprieve. It truly is just the two of us. Deep sorrow stirs inside me at that thought. However, having Bameli here beside me, well, that gives me at least a little comfort. I lean against his shoulder, and he doesn't move to stop me. We sit together as we wait for the sun to descend from the sky. The sky turns orange as sunset comes upon us. As the color seems to drain from the world, being consumed by the fog, the guide makes his appearance.
It's almost time.
I nod and feel myself grow tense. We truly are about to return to those bridges. All of us wait in an uncomfortable silence until night falls. Night settles like a shroud over the land, every inch of the world now covered in unrelenting darkness. Suddenly there is a gurgling. The water parts as the bridges of Sinnlos rise, powered by some unnatural force, creaking like they might fall apart. I feel an inexplicable pounding like a hammer in the back of my head, beating faster and heavier than my own heart. I clench my teeth to stop it from churning my stomach.
We must go now.
The guy doesn't wait for any replies, briskly starting in the direction of the shore. Bameli and I match his pace. I can feel the air weighing on us, a sensation that slows our steps despite being rested. Something hovers in my mind, the mirrored memory of the beginning of the last night's journey. One day ago feels like a lifetime passed. The thick, inky water sloshes reluctantly off the boards, bleeding back into the lake, till finally it stills. A shudder crawls over my body as I place my foot on the boards, but I quickly shake it off. I have no other option. We have to go through this again. All tense as day-old corpses, we walk over the bridges in silence. The only sound that accompanies us is the thick lapping water at the bridge. Bameli stays close by my side with a sour expression on his face. He evidently has little interest in masking his disgust. He murmurs something beneath his breath, but it's inaudible. I decide not to ask about it. It wasn't meant for me to hear. It feels as though barely any time has passed when it is explained that half the night has crept by. We encountered a few sunken bridges which forced us to reroute, while other paths were rotten enough to make us stagger our steps. However, the biggest threat of all is eerily absent, the prowlers. I haven't seen more of than shadowy glimpses of them down the paths. However, the biggest threat of all is eerily absent, the prowlers. I haven't seen more than shadowy glimpses of them down the other paths, and even those may have simply been tricks of the fog. I feel I may be even more on edge tonight than the last. Judging by Bameli's tenseness, he isn't set at ease by their lack of presence either.
Why?
I whisper the question softly, almost silently as I scan left and right across the impossibly empty bridges for any sign of movement. I ponder whether they're still weary from the consuming blaze that lit up the night yesterday, or if there are less dragging themselves across the bridges than usual because many have gotten already what they wanted. My skin crawls with a touch of icy fingers at the thought I can't control the sharp shiver that travels down my spine. Bameli catches my concern and he brings himself closer to my ear.
This isn't right. It shouldn't be nearly this easy to cross.
Could they be planning something?
Bameli lightly shakes his head. He speaks with suspicion in his voice as he peers at the guide ahead.
I don't know.
As time passes by, we continue to see nothing but more bridges and fog. Beside me, Bameli is becoming more and more agitated the longer we go without disruption. I can read Bameli well enough to know that his anger is still directed at the guide rather than the bridges themselves. It was my hope that he would be able to contain his feelings toward our lead until we had put this maze behind us. That is becoming unlikely. I resolve to step in before it grows too heated, and there is yet another hazardous argument.
Your concentration is clouded, Bameli. What is troubling you?
Surely you're already aware. It's him.
Bameli glowers hatefully at the guide. I purse my lips for a moment before continuing, resigned.
I do know that. However, you need to stop allowing that to consume you, or else you could get hurt. Or even...
Bameli releases an exasperated sigh while folding his arms.
That is impossible. I can't stop myself from thinking about it. Everything makes so much sense now.
What do you mean by that?
Recall yesterday. I asked him why he would lead others at all if he was heartlessly going to leave them behind. What if this is the reason? Before, we could scarcely escape these monsters, and now I can't even hear a whisper of one. What if they're already satisfied with what they've taken?
My eyes widen and I stifle a gasp. The situation at hand giving both of us a reason to think on that possibility is absolutely unsettling, but his conclusion is even worse still. The notion of the guide allowing others to die unnecessarily on purpose to make it less dangerous for the remaining few, that is not something I was prepared for.
Even back when we started, the first time we met the guide, he mentioned that at least one of us would die before the journey was finished. Didn't that exchange seem strange to you? He said it as though it was a price to pay for coming with him. The guide is free to do as he pleases. He can and will threaten to leave the entire group behind at so much as a hint of resistance. Nothing is stopping him. He knew this was going to happen. He had to know.
I take a few moments to breathe. Despite the danger, I only barely resist shutting my eyes against the
We need
world.
to make it to the other side. We must keep moving forward and survive. The guide is our only way across.
My usual reply to Bameli's worries does not make an impression. His eyes are not swayed. He continues to stare into me.
I am saying he cannot be trusted with our lives at this very moment. I need an answer to that, Kika. What do you really think?
If I'm being honest, I strongly believe he told us from the beginning not to have more than two. But we'll see. Coming to any decision on the matter is impossible right now. There's too much danger and too many unknowns to account for to reach any sort of conclusion. I have no choice but to shut the conversation down. I can only hope Bameli will take it seriously.
When everything is through, then we may talk about it. End of discussion.
Bameli doesn't battle me further on the issue. His face no longer retains any anger, only sorrow. He returns his gaze straight ahead. Our progress continues steadily, and we still encounter no significant difficulties.
How much longer until we reach the other side? We've traveled quite a ways.
Bameli's quiet, breaking question doesn't sound particularly enthused.
It should only be another couple of hours.
Huh.
Bameli is unconvinced. It is not only I who notices. The guide suddenly stops. Eerily, he turns his head to the side and looks back at us.
Is there a problem with that?
Is there?
We've progressed through the bridges at a much quicker clip this time. Bameli's question was not idle curiosity. He was confirming that fact for himself. I should have known. The guide looks to be slightly irritated over the attitude Bameli has taken.
If you have something to say, you should say it. Unless you're afraid that I'm going to leave you behind.
His statement lands heavily on us. Did he listen to our conversation? There were no sounds to cover our voices. However, I had assumed we were far enough away from the guide to keep our words to ourselves. He stares with such an icy expression I nearly freeze in place. Bameli, on the other hand, heaps up and grows more hostile. He leaves my side to rush into the guide's flickering light.
Don't.
This is going much too far. I urge him to come back. He ignores me and takes a stand facing the guide.
Am I right? Are you going to leave us behind after what I've done?
The guide isn't bothered at all by Bamel entering his space. He gives a level answer.
No.
Well, that's grand. In that case, I'd like to know if I'm on the right track about something else. Are the monsters missing because they've already eaten? Or is there some other reason why they've all mysteriously vanished?
The guide pauses for a moment. His eyes close and he becomes completely still.
It's possible.
Bameli glares at the guide over the admittance. It's as though he heard nothing after the first line the guide spoke. The guide is unfazed.
If you enter these bridges, all you should expect is death. That is no secret. You need to stop putting so much energy into finding meaning, or else you will end up like the others.
Bameli ends up speechless, caught off guard by the guide openly discussing his accusation. The guide continues at Bameli's silence, annoyance leaking into his voice.
You think that the results would have been different if only I had said more or did something differently, but that is not true. The conclusion would be exactly the same. If Lou hadn't died when he did, he would have been lost at some other point during the trip.
Lou?
Yes, Lou was his name. I had spoken with him in the past. He wanted to cross the bridges. I had deemed him unfit. He was far too desperate and unprepared. There's no helping someone like that.
The guide sounds even more agitated as he elaborates. Bameli seems to be finished with being surprised. His anger reignites.
That's all well and true. Why haven't you died yet? How is it that you've been able to cross these horrendous bridges over and over again without suffering the same consequences as everyone else?
The guide's face twists into a vicious snarl. He shouts.
I have died! I have no life to give. Everything I am, everything I could have been, was surrendered to this lake. That is the only reason why I'm able to stand before you now. I can show you the way, and I can give you advice on how to survive the perils you will face. That is all I'm able to offer. Is that not enough for you? What else do you want from me? Kindness? Sympathy? It's been far too many years since I was capable of giving anything like that.
He finally stops to catch his breath, though the emotion in his eyes still shines intently. There is no response from either of us. An agonizing silence permeates the air. No one dares to even move. The tension is cut as the boards beneath me start to creak. My eyes dart down. The bridge is sinking. Rapidly. Instinctively, I jump backwards, but the new section of bridge groans horribly as it too starts to tilt into the water. They keep getting farther and farther away with each disappearing platform I move off of. I look up at Bameli's call. My chest tightens when I see him and the guide on what has become of the other side of the small chasm. I leap back just in time as the bridge under me snaps like a twig. Glancing over again, they keep getting farther and farther away with each disappearing platform I move off of. Dread creeps up my neck and I nearly lose my footing once I realize what's happening. Desperately stumbling backwards, I finally manage to regain my balance. I use this to leap far back enough that the bridge I land on doesn't immediately start to fall apart under my weight. In another swift steps, I am finally on sturdy wood. The bridges reluctantly stop shifting and settle. The only trace left of what was once a huge section of bridge is a few splintered boards floating in the murky water. The lake consumed it. Somehow I am not surprised. Regaining my bearings, I face what has become of my circumstances. I am now separated from Bameli and the guide by a far wider gorge than anyone could leap. My throat goes bone dry as I teeter at the edge of the bridge, mind wildly scrambling for a solution that doesn't come. I lock onto Bameli's face. He's completely aghast, darting from one side of the bridge to the other like a panicked animal. There's no mistaking that he's desperate to help me in some way. However, there's also no mistaking that there aren't any options available to him. He turns to the guide with pleading eyes, all his earlier hostility sunken with the bridges. I'm too far off to grasp what Bameli is asking, but I can get the impression he is seeing if there's another way. The guide turns to me. He's completely cooled down from the earlier interaction, back to his same placid expression. He focuses back on Bameli, who has now gripped him by the cloak. The guide says one word. Judging from the look of pure terror on Bameli's face, I can only assume it was no. There's no way back to them. The guide frees himself from Bameli's grasp and continues speaking. Bameli still seems horribly shaken in his words. I can barely see from here, but I think he's quivering. As I watch the two discuss my fate, unable to say anything, fear starts to crawl over me. My arm runs cool to cold to freezing. It's not long before the rest of my body follows. I notice Bameli cover his face with a still shuddering hand. The guide's voice echoes loudly across the water, separating me from them.
Go back and take the next bridge you come across that goes west. There may be enough time for you to find your own way.
I blink, taken aback for a moment, before I quickly regain my composure. That's right. This isn't over. I still have my lantern with me. The prowlers are less active, and if the guide says that it's possible, it could be true. I nod solemnly at his words and yell back.
I'll meet you there. Don't wait for me.
He bows his head and starts to slowly back away from the edge. Bameli pulls his head from his hand to look at me. Even across the water, I can tell that he's crying. I detest the idea of having to part ways with Bameli, but I know that there's no other way. I smile forlornly at him as the wind whips against my back. I speak softly.
You need to go.
There is no way he could have heard me, yet I'm confident that the sentiment got across. I spin on my heels and run back the way we came, searching for the bridge the guide said to take. I can only hope that we all safely reunite before this night ends. I spare a brief glance behind me. However, there's not a trace of them or even the dead end I was stranded at. With a painful contracting of my heart, I realize that I am truly alone now. Quickly, I shake off the thought and refocus my attention on what's right in front of me. The first branching of the path comes into reach. I skid into a full stop in front of it. The path west is as dark and desolate as every bridge. It's impossible to see what's down the twisting way. The previous conversation comes floating back to me. Now that I am here, I must face that concern. Is the guide reliable? Can he be trusted? I had to leave so they could go on without being weighed down. That I don't regret. However, I can't help but wonder if the guide couldn't give me a proper suggestion because of the sinking bridges. A mistake could have been made. It is also possible he knowingly gave false hope to keep the situation calm, or perhaps he intentionally set me to the wrong path because it would be easier for them if I did not make it. I look between the pathways. Based on my direction, it does seem as though other options could potentially connect me to them before the west does. Yet I cannot possibly know until I move forward. I need to make a decision. I'm going to follow the guide's path. No, I can't allow doubt to take control. We've known from the beginning that there is only one path that has led travelers to safety. His. I will take the guide on his word. Without wasting an additional moment, I make my way across the western bridge. I walk at a moderately brisk pace, not wanting to risk tripping or running out of energy at a moment where I need it. If the eeriness of the lake was disconcerting before, now it is overwhelming. The blizzard-like fog drifting over the waters limits my vision to the span of my arms. The utter silence was a comfort, despite how otherworldly it felt, but the whispering of the lake has started to stir now. I gulp, despite myself. They've noticed me. As their chattering grows, I consider briefly if the others hear them as well, or if they have come out specifically because I am on my own. I straighten my back and walk more surely. I cannot let them believe I am an easy target. I even consider keeping my sword in hand, but it doesn't seem entirely likely they would realize it is something that could hurt them. To keep my mind from wandering into dark places, I count my steps like we used to in training. 1, 2, 3, 4. Despite my best efforts, things are starting to get to me. My worries wash over me, causing painful twinges underneath my clothes that make me jerk and twitch like a fly-bitten horse. The whispering inhuman voices, the feeling of vulnerability, the horrible thought of being hopelessly lost, all melded together is consuming me. My pace breaks from the steady rhythm of my counting set. It quickens more as I start to succumb to fear. My brisk steps turn into long, frantic strides. Something in me whispers, "Faster, go faster, don't let them catch you," and I listen. I break into a run, like moving on landmines. Flashes of fear explode in my mind and drive my feet harder, faster, stronger along the path. Until suddenly my sense of reason returns and I stop dead. My chest rises and falls with deep, heaving breaths as I try to calm myself down. The monsters erupt into an inharmonious chorus of what sounds to be wicked laughs. I fight the urge to shout back at the creatures. This feels like a nightmare I will never wake up from. I take another breath and resume my measured progress. Even after the first crossroad, I continue with the guide's simple direction, keeping west every chance I get. I have no other hints from this labyrinth. It's difficult to tell how much time has passed. It must be at least an hour, judging by how much energy I've expended. Since I recomposed myself, I have not stopped walking for a second. Despite how much time has worn on, the route feels like an endless abyss. Then I hear a noise which causes a shuddering chill to creep down my spine. An uneven clicking followed by a squelching sound. It's a prowler. I immediately turn to look behind me. There's nothing. I breathe out, relieved. It's probably their way. My ears search for the source of the noise, but with all the babble the Nixie are making, the direction is clouded. I strain my ears. That's it. The noise is drifting slowly from one of the connecting paths up ahead. I can faintly tell the noise is drawing nearer. The prowler has not arrived yet, but soon its path will intercept with my own. I will not wait for it to reveal itself, leaving me two options. I can run past the bridge connection to get ahead of it, or I turn back and find a new path to take. Go back. I can't help. I have to keep going. I have faith that following the same path I've been is for the best. I steel myself and build up speed. I get closer and closer to the branch with the lurking threat and pick up my pace, so I'm sprinting. I hear a gurgling hiss as I pass through the crossroad. It must have been close enough to be pained by the light. I barely made it. However, I didn't hear any splash. It is still nearby. I look behind me to see if it has at least decided to come no further. Horrified, I realize that it's pointedly following me. It is no longer mindlessly dragging itself through blackness. I have become its target. Its limbs bend wildly and unnaturally. It looks as though it's been only barely keeping itself upright as its torso wobbles on its hips. That isn't stopping it from giving chase. I focus my view back ahead and continue to run. My breathing rapidly becomes ragged. I can still hear the squishing footsteps of the prowler behind me as it lunges its body forward at a natural gait. Without warning, the bridge lurches to one side. Catching me completely off guard, I lose my footing and slam into the damp surface of the bridge. My light falls with me, painfully snuffing out. Splashes and the excited stirring of many voices come from the lake. How? Why? Is it rotting, or do they push the support beams? I'm left with no time to ponder the mystery as the monster draws near. I scramble back onto my feet as it closes in. Grabbing my dark lantern, I resume running to put some space between us again. I open the latch on the lantern and pull out a match. I'll have to slow down, at least briefly, to properly light the flame without it blowing out. With death still on my heels, I must not let one precious moment be wasted. Set on my plan, and with everything in hand, I begin to decrease my pace. Moving as fast as I am capable, I place a lit match inside the lantern and the oil catches fire. As the flame grows, I can hear the awful footsteps behind me begin to peter out. I steal a glance behind me. It has truly stopped. The return of the light seems to catch it off guard, and thankfully it declines, coming closer. I must stare it down. I manage to calm my mind down from the commotion and recall what the guide said when we first encountered a prowler. You don't have to run or fight, you only need to keep moving while keeping an eye on it. I can't keep on running forever, and doing so only seems to invigorate them further. I fix my stare on it forcefully as the creature recoils from my relit lantern. Moving at a steady but brisk pace, I continue forward, making sure to check behind me often. It creeps at a distance, however the thing makes no more dramatic attempts to engage with me, choosing only to lurk. I'm set on the edge by its presence, but in a way it's strangely beneficial. It makes it harder to get lost within my own mind when the tension in the air is so high. Reaffirming my goals, I go down bridge after bridge, making my way to what I can only hope is the way out. Eventually the prowler halts at the precipice of one of the branches. Frustrated, it paces back and forth on the border as though something is physically stopping it from going further. I decide to take that as a good omen. This journey of mine returns to one of isolation. Even the whispers of Sinnlos have ceased. Suddenly, I realize through the fog the black sky is turning dark blue. Dawn is beginning to rise. At this point, there's no use in keeping up my strength. I sprint down the bridge, going faster and faster as I hold out for some sort of sign. Anything. Eventually, I receive one. The silhouette of land peeks into my field of vision. I can scarcely believe it as I blink away the tears. With renewed spirit, I press down the bridge with increased speed, desperately trying to outpace the sun. With the glowing orbs peeking into view against the obscured sky and begins to ascend unfeelingly. With each step, the sky brightens ever so slightly more. I race through the oppressive fog and there's a voice in the distance. It isn't the horrifying sounds of monsters looming. It's Bameli. He's calling out for me. I shout back to him through the dark, foggy void. My voice comes out as a horribly weak wheeze between deep, shaky breaths. I'm almost certain he couldn't hear me. I'm not bothered by that, however. I will find him. I'm coming, Bameli. Please, just wait for me. I keep running against the increasing light, and his figure comes into view here, on the bridges. Bameli races towards me at a high speed, and doesn't slow down when he gets near. He grabs hold of my side and supports my dropping frame as I slow to a stop. I barely choke out a sentence as I strain to catch my breath.
Why are you here?
I was looking for you, of course. I knew you had to be nearby. You had to be. Don't worry over it. I wasn't reckless enough to go in the dark. I waited until there was some sun and stayed on one path.
He grins at his own planning skills. I go cross at his risky
I
behavior.
just could have sunk.
Despite the admonishment, I'm terribly relieved to see him again.
You are free to give me a proper lecture some other time. Right now, I'd say it's time for us to get out of this damned place. Are you still able to run?
I put all my weight back onto my feet and nod at him confidently, though my legs still lightly quake beneath me. Bameli gives me a reassuring smile, something I had come to believe I would never get to see again.
Don't worry, we're nearly there.
I provide a battered smile in return. The two of us tear across the bridges in the direction Bameli points out, and just as he promised, the end comes into view. Against all the odds, we both make it. I nearly tumble off the bridges onto solid ground. I crouch on the ground and lay my head between my legs, unable to stand. I rest there quietly for a few moments, taking time to allow my breathing and emotions to settle down. Finally, I look up from my lap and see Bameli standing ahead of me. Both of our eyes are flowing with tears. Bameli walks over and sits in the dirt nearby. He gazes deeply into my eyes with a gentle smile gracing his lips. No words need to be exchanged between us to know what the other is thinking. I'm glad for it, because I'm not sure I'd be able to speak even if I needed to. The sound of sloshing and wood lurching captures our attention as the bridges begin to sink. In a few minutes, only the lonely dock is left. With that, the guide walks towards
It
me.
is time to leave this place. There is nothing left for you here.
Upon being addressed by him, I rise to my feet. He has a calm look on his face, though there is force behind his serenity. I open my mouth in an attempt to speak, however, I quickly realize I have little idea of what to say. Do I thank him for this? Should I give him my trust? Was our survival because of him or despite him? Even now I cannot know for certain. And then the fog is removed from my thoughts. After everything that has happened, it becomes clear. I harden my face to match his serious disposition. There is something he is certainly right of. This lake isn't a place to linger. Going round and round in circles will never help. We cannot submit our lives or our mind to Sinnlos. For better or for ill, there is only one person who can help those once they are within its grasp. The guide. If he were removed, the place would be no safer. What must do if I truly want to defend others is keep them from coming here at all. When I return to my village, I intend to make that information acutely known to our elder. For that to happen, we must leave.
Goodbye.
His eyes narrow as he looks over me. I begin to feel uncomfortable under his scrutiny, but for a moment I could swear I noticed him smiling slightly. However, it could easily be a trick of the morning sun. I look away to face Bameli, not wanting to get caught up in this any longer.
Bameli, we're leaving.
He lifts his head at my voice and grins through his expression quickly sours into a frown. He shows no eagerness to move forward and keeps his distance. He still regrets that it is only us who are leaving. I empathize greatly with him, knowing that feeling is no one is one we will never escape from, even after this lake is far behind us. However, he manages to weakly smile again.
Those words are music to my ears. Let's head out.
Bamelia walks toward the forest without even acknowledging the guide. That is for the best on the whole. We must get away from here. It saddens me to think Bamelia doesn't even have the strength to become angry, though perhaps he had an epiphany about this lake in the same way that I did. We will be able to discuss that on another occasion. Despite the firmness I so intently tried to have, my heart starts to waver. Margaret, Lou, they're both still here. I wish to give them a proper farewell. I want to do something. My eyes begin to water and I almost turn back around. No, it is done. I need to remember that. They would never want me to ascribe their lives to Sinnlos. Nothing would disgrace their memory more. I will keep them in my thoughts without allowing the lake to poison me. With my steadfastness truly regained, I march into the light with no hesitation. With a solemn heart, I at last arrived at Hemmer. They were grateful to see me, for it was a desperate situation indeed. The urgency meant that my mind was occupied with other matters. I worked tirelessly to aid Hemmer's own guards in forcing back the brigadiers. But during the moments of calm and when the sun went down, I would remember the lake. Bamelia was of great help during the fight. His outwardly positive demeanor lifted the spirits of many around him, but I could see from the shadows in his eyes that he hadn't forgotten what we went through, nor could I miss the distance that had grown between us. He spoke fewer words to me, and I never gave many either, yet he seemed stronger than I had seen before. I admire his will. When receiving payments for his services, the guide must give a report of all those who both succeeded and failed to cross the lake. The name and fate of Margaret soon became known in Hemmer. I added that she was an intelligent, thoughtful person and urged them to show respect for her passing. I hope that one day I will have the opportunity to go to her hometown and give my own proper respects. His retelling of events had little to say of Lou. I know that is because he was not meant to be there and was never one to open up. But it still saddens me to face how I never truly got to know who he was. I can only pray that those who cared for him will learn the truth of what happened. I have not heard nor seen the guide since then. He will remain obscured in that realm of fog and fear, a mysterious light off in the distance that is ever out of reach of the real world. I worry about when I must return home to my usual life. It will be difficult to continue as things were before. One thing I know for certain is that my village elder must be told that no one is to cross Sinnlos again. I have already told the Hemmer leaders the same. Not a single more person should have to experience what we did. Its darkness will remain with me for the rest of my days. Though so much was lost, I try to believe that our lessons will keep others from suffering the same way, and, in the end, something will be gained. Lake of Voices. Okay, well, that was good. I'm actually fairly certain I got the worst possible ending. I think if I went back through and I tried to save everybody, I think my ending could have been better. But that one was dark. And I kind of like a dark ending, you know? Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this visual novel called Lake of Voices. Please give me a like, a subscription, and a comment in here telling me what you thought of the video. And I'll see you guys in the next one.